Here we go. All right, so title, what teenage brains can teach us about thinking creatively. So this is kind of a positive article about teenagers. I know sometimes that in the adult world, people tend to say and focus on negative things with teenagers, but this one is focusing on the positives. It is a nonfiction article. It is news-based. We're going to scroll down to the questions. There's only 3 for today, 2 multiple choice and a race strategy. Question 1, read the following paragraph from the section Families, Environments Contribute to Brain Development. So we know when we see the paragraph that says that doesn't mean lifting, we know we're gonna have to pay attention because we have a question about that. And then how does using the word understanding affect the tone of the paragraph? Remember, tone is how the author is coming across to you. Question 2, read the following claim. Teenagers should not be trusted to make decisions for themselves. How would Joanna Lee Williams most likely respond? So when we see Joanna Lee Williams, we're going to have to pay attention to what she thinks about teenagers, especially in terms of them making decisions for themselves. And then question 3, what is the author's purpose for writing this article, which is the why? Why did the author write this article? To inform or to persuade us to do something or think a certain way? So we're going to be paying attention to that as we go. Scroll back up to the top. And here we go. So we have a picture here, the caption, teens hang out near a fence. A new study says we can learn a lot from how teenage brains work. And now we'll start reading. Teenagers generate colossal revenue on YouTube and draw millions of views to Minecraft and makeup streams. They create endlessly on TikTok. They learn second languages and sonatas. They invent dances, coin slang words, and lead political movements. So why don't teenagers get more credit? For years, adults have regarded teens as impulsive and emotionally uncontrolled. Then, advancements in neuroscience helped to broaden our understanding of teen behavior. The public learned more about the brain's prefrontal cortex. It's the part that regulates planning and decision-making and doesn't mature until around age 25. This went a long way toward explaining adolescents' often confusing behavior. However, it left adults more focused on the teenage brain's role in risk-taking rather than its role in learning and creating. That has frustrated some researchers. A sprawling report on adolescent development was released in 2019 by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. It noted that oversimplified headlines and adult concern with teenage vulnerability have led to a fundamental misunderstanding of recent science. So a couple of things here. We open up this passage with the positive about all these creative things that teenagers are doing right now and things that they're doing not only to create money, but just to learn and to express themselves and be creative. And why don't teenagers get more credit? And they said it has to do a lot with this source, right? This research that came out that says your brain's prefrontal cortex that helps you make decisions doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old. So then a lot of people were like, oh, teenagers can't make their own decisions because that part of their brain's not even fully developed yet. So I think that's where a lot of this came from over the past 10, 15 years is when this research came out. So let's move on to the next section before we do our first annotation. Brain development is about growing and learning. The report is part of a growing effort by nonprofits, scientists, and policy scholars to reframe how different disciplines and the general public think about adolescence. And by the way, adolescence is, again, your like teenage years.
It's a teenage.
Yes, exactly. It's true that the emotional and rational parts of teen brains develop at different paces, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, researchers say. Fixating on the negatives overlooks the very opportunities that can help teens to learn and grow. The teens' fearlessness can concern adults, said Adriana Galvin, director of the University of California, Los Angeles Developmental Neuroscience Laboratory. That is a mouthful. That is a very long name. However, it is exactly what makes adolescents thrive in the space of creativity and enacting social change. So they're saying you might come across a little bit fearless because you don't have a fully developed part of your brain yet in terms of decision making. However, because you have this fearlessness, you can also be super creative and do things that other people can't at your age. Last paragraph of the section. The teenage brain's characteristics, including its inclination, that's like it's moving towards that, towards taking risks, are what prepare teenagers for adulthood. It's what lends them a sort of superpower in learning, acquiring skills, and creativity. Teenage brains are at a unique neurological stage. They can adapt like in childhood. He's here. Sorry. They can adapt like in childhood, building up new connections and pruning away unused ones. But they are also starting to gain the adult ability to think abstractly, envision the future, and make social connections, Galvin said. I know that was a very long section, so when we're looking at this annotation, there's a lot going on. But we know we're looking at a couple of topics. We're looking at teenage brains and the development of teenage brains, and we're also looking at teens' ability to be creative, right? So I want you to kind of take all that, put it into a sentence for me for your annotation 1. I'm sorry, our neighbor just came over to drop off our lawnmower. My dog is barking. So much going on right now. I apologize. I'm going to close the door. Hang on, guys. I'll be right back. Okay, so take another 30 seconds or so to finish up that annotation 1. And if you want to put it in the chat, I can give you guys feedback. I know I gave you some guidance there, so you might not need feedback on this one, but if you want me to check your annotation, you can put it in the chat. Yeah, Eric, that works. I would definitely include y'all something about brain development in here because the brain development and the research on your teenage brains is like a big part of this. Yes, Edixon, that's great. That's a good one. Let me give you guys about 20 more seconds if you want to put your annotation in, and then we'll move on to the second part of the passage. Yeah, Caesar, that's good. And we know that that risk-taking they're saying is, usually people think of it as a bad thing with teenagers, but it's also a good thing in terms of being creative. Jayla, I wouldn't say that people think they don't have creativity. They're kind of saying something else about how people view teenagers. Yes, Tavana, that's great. All right, guys, let's go on to section 2 where it starts off a discovery pointing to positive feedback. So we know we're probably going to start seeing some more positive stuff about teenage development here because of the subtitle. The prefrontal cortex remains important to adolescent neuroscience, Galvin said. However, recent research has also focused on the regions that contribute to teenagers' socio-emotional development and the understanding that these regions don't develop in isolation. The prefrontal cortex, the social regions, and other parts of the brain are also building and refining new connections between each other. It's a process just as important as the maturation itself. That's like to mature. In her research, for example, Galvin has examined the connection between the brain's striatum, a region associated with reward-seeking behavior, and the hippocampus, associated with learning and memory. Her work suggests that the connection is especially strong in teens and that adolescents are more likely than adults to learn from positive feedback. This could have applications for education, she said. Let's say the adolescent brain is really good at learning from rewards, Galvin said, driving the kinds of thrill-seeking behaviors that otherwise put adults on edge. If so, we should leverage that to help them learn. Risks, in other words, don't have to always seem harmful, said Joanna Lee Williams. She's an associate professor at the University of Virginia's Curry School of Education and Human Development. She also contributed to the National Academy's report. They can be healthy too, like deciding to join the marching band. So I want to go back real quick to this part here. It's not what the whole section is about, but this connection between the teenage brain and learning and reward-seeking behavior is why a lot of times you guys are driven by competition in class, because if you think you're getting a reward for something, you're more likely to learn it because you get excited about
Try
it.
harder.
Try harder. If you think you're going to get something out of it. Teenagers, like a lot of y'all, like when I'm teaching, will ask like, well, why am I even doing this? And that's because when you learn something, you want to know that you're getting something out of it. whether
for
that
candy.
is candy or a good grade, or maybe like it actually has a real world, like you know that you're going to use it in real life. And that's just how teenage brains tend to work. Those two things are really closely associated, so it makes sense. So annotation 2, they're focusing on a couple of positive things here about teenage learning and teenage development. So I want you guys to put that in your second annotation. What are some of the positive things here that they're talking about in terms of teenage brains and teenage learning? I'm gonna give you guys about a minute to do that. Yeah, Caroline, that's good for your first annotation. I like that. I'm gonna give you guys about 45 seconds to put that annotation in the chat for me, and I can give you guys some feedback. It's good that it seems like the lawnmower's working. Sorry, it's good that it seems like the lawnmower's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, Caesar, Jayla, those are good. Yeah, Edixon, I really like yours because it incorporates the whole section. That's really good. I like that. Okay, sounds good, Alicia. Thanks. Yeah, Tavana, that is good, but I would focus on something positive from that section because this section is all about like some of the positive effects of the teenage brain and learning and development. All right, let's go 15 more seconds or so, and then we're going to pick up at the end of the passage. All right, let's roll. Last section, families, or last two sections, I think. Yeah, before we end. Families, environments contribute to brain development. That doesn't mean that lifting all the limits on teenage behavior or waving away risks entirely. But parents and educators can start by understanding that some risks are crucial for learning and creating, Williams and other researchers say. Williams acknowledges that that comes from a broad bird's eye view. The report's findings will not apply to every argument between adults and teenagers. Still, generally, teens' sensitivity to rewards means they might not simply ignore risks, but think of them positively. Parents and educators can take advantage of that, helping teens to learn from mistakes rather than leaping straight to punishing them. The adolescent brain doesn't develop in isolation, said Galvin, who also helped review the National Academy's report. It develops in families, it develops in systems, and it develops in different environments. Any of those pieces can change a teenager's growth for better or for worse. That's something that youth advocates and educators have known for years. Williams said she has spoken with middle school educators whose concerns were much closer to the ground. What does the new research mean for students in my school facing issues such as mental illness, family problems, racism, or economic inequality? Last section. Adolescence as an age of opportunity. Mental illness refers to a range of mental health conditions. These are disorders that can affect mood, thoughts, and behavior. Examples include depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. Many people have mental health concerns at some point. What distinguishes a mental illness such as depression from normal feelings such as sadness is that mental illness causes ongoing stress and severely interferes with a person's ability to function. Most mental illness can be treated with medication and therapy. Williams said she believes in the promise of adolescence and adolescence as an age of opportunity. However, that does not mean that there aren't also these huge realistic challenges as well. So talking a lot here about how your brains are so great at being creative and taking risks, but you might have different home environments or different experiences in your life that happen to you, talking about how mental health plays into this in terms of depression or anxiety and how that can affect your risk taking. So even though your brains are meant for creative risk taking, there's still a lot of challenges you guys face as teenagers along the way too. Next paragraph. She sees teens leading social movements, injecting energy and new ideas into public life. That has been the case throughout history, she said, and newer developmental science explains why. She's proud and excited when she sees those changes, but not surprised. If more youth had this opportunity, she said, then of course we should expect these things. And talking about doing these like crazy things. I'm sure you've heard of like, can't remember her name, but the teenage girl who was like standing on the steps and protesting against climate change. And she was just a teenager, and that whole risk-taking factor that she was able to do changed people's lives. And I think that's what they're trying to get you guys to understand here, right? That if you had the opportunity more to take risks and to do these amazing things, we would expect great things from teenagers all the time. So go ahead and lead into your annotation 3. I know it covered a lot. We talked about the environment and experiences you grow up in. We talked about mental health a little bit, but also ultimately that even though you guys have a lot of challenges in terms of being a teenager, there's also a lot of opportunity there as well. So if you can go ahead and wrap that up, put that in 1 or 2 sentences as your annotation for the end of the passage. And I'll give you guys about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes to do that one. I'll give you a little bit longer because that was a longer section. Yeah, Tavana, that's good for yours. I'll give you about 45 more seconds on that annotation. Edixon, yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah, Neely, that's good. Jayla, that's good. Caesar, I like where you're going with that. I wouldn't say that most people expect good things from teenagers. I think this article is trying to help us to understand that. I think the point they're trying to make is people kind of expect teenagers to make like bad risks and bad choices, but this article is showing us that that's actually like a good thing here. But I don't think a lot of people expect it yet. That's something that we're trying to move towards. We're trying to move towards expecting good things out of teenagers and their creativity and their risk-taking.
Most people think that like the risk-taking teenagers do is always almost bad, almost most of the
Right,
time.
like teenagers make a bunch of mistakes. They make like dumb mistakes without thinking about it, and I think that's how a lot of people have viewed adolescents and teenagers in the past. And I think this article is definitely trying to get us to understand that risk-taking and creativity are really good parts of the teenage brain that we should be focusing on. All right, guys, let's take a look at these questions. We got 2 multiple choice and a race strategy. Question number 1 is this particular paragraph. That doesn't mean lifting all limits on teenage behavior or waving away risks entirely, but parents and educators can start by understanding that some risks are crucial for learning and creating, Williams and other researchers say. So it doesn't mean we're just gonna give like teenagers free reign to do whatever they want, but we do need to start as, sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo back here. But parents and teachers, educators should start by recognizing the learning and the creating for sure as well, and not just jumping to bad conclusions, right? So how does using the word understanding affect the tone of the paragraph? So parents and educators can start by understanding that some risks are crucial or important for learning and creating. Parents and educators can start by understanding. So it creates a more scholarly tone. So that's scholarly, like academic. B, it creates a more sympathetic tone. That means when you're trying to like connect with other people. It creates a more sentimental tone. That's like emotional. D, it creates a more serious tone. So let's get rid of some of these here. What's an answer we can get rid of that's not really the tone of this paragraph?
Sentimental.
Yeah, I'm seeing from a couple of people, we can get rid of a more scholarly tone. The word understanding here doesn't make this more academic. It's talking about parents and educators can start by understanding some of these teenage risks are for a good thing, right? So we're going to get rid of A. And I heard a couple people say, or saw on the chat, a couple people say get rid of C. It doesn't make it more like emotional. This paragraph doesn't make us want to like go cry, right? So if we're down between sympathetic or serious, so serious would be kind of like formal, right? And sympathetic is more trying to like, it's when you try to connect with another human being, right? It's to have sympathy for someone. So, but parents and educators can start by understanding that some risks are crucial for learning and creating. So does this word understanding here mean more serious, or does it mean more like making connections with another person? So let me take a look in the chat here. Yeah, it looks like most of you are getting this right. Great. A couple of wrong answers, mostly right. Okay, so the best answer here, most of you got, is B, the sympathetic tone. We're just focusing on the word understanding here, guys, and by trying to get parents and teachers to understand why teenagers are taking these risks and being creative, that means that we have to try to connect with teenagers and understand what they're going through, right? When you say, like, you don't understand what I'm going through, if they can start by understanding, that is like a sympathetic tone. It means I'm trying to connect with you as a human being. It doesn't just make it more serious. The rest of the passage that talks about the research and like some of that more boring research stuff may be serious, but this particular section, sympathetic, B. Let's look at number 2. Read the following claim. Teenagers should not be trusted to make decisions for themselves. How would Joanna Lee Williams most likely respond to this claim? So we're going to look for Joanna Lee Williams. And the easiest way I know to do it, if you do Control F, so Control F is find. I'm going to look for Joanna in this passage. And then this is where I find her. So I'm going to go back, and this is what it's saying. Risks, in other words, don't have to always seem harmful, said Joanna Lee Williams. She's an associate professor at this university. She also contributed to the report. They can be healthy too, like deciding to join the marching band. So she sees it in a pretty positive way, right? The risks that teenagers take don't always have to be harmful. Taking risks for teenagers can be a healthy thing, can be a good thing. So then how would she probably respond to teenagers should not be trusted to make decisions for themselves? A, most teenagers do not have the capacity to make important decisions about their future. B, taking risks and learning to exercise judgment are important aspects of learning to be an adult. C, parents should give teens the chance to decide things on their own if they are mature enough. D, teens develop their capacity to make decisions based on well-defined parental expectations. So how would this chick, Joanna, again, in this paragraph, what would she say? If she thinks that risks don't have to be a harmful thing, they can be a healthy thing and a good thing for teenagers to take risks, which one, A, B, C, or D, would she most likely agree with for number 2? Okay, I'm seeing some back and forth between 2 answers. Let's look at those 2. Okay, so looks like most of you are down between B and C on this one. How would Joanna respond to the fact that if somebody said, we can't trust teenagers to make decisions for themselves, how would this person, Joanna Lee Williams, respond? And you guys are down between taking risks is an important aspect of learning, Or C, parents should give teens the chance to decide things on their own if they are mature enough. If we go back to this section with Joanna, if she is saying that taking risks can be a healthy thing, like deciding to join the marching band, and she wants teenagers to take risks, then our best answer here is going to be which one. If she thinks that taking risks is a healthy thing, which one makes more sense, B or C? Yeah, a lot of you are getting it. Good. Yeah, the answer is B. Taking risks and learning are important aspects of learning. If she's saying taking risks is healthy, that's the same thing as saying it's an important aspect of learning for sure. Okay, we're going to move on to our last question here. You guys are going to do this individually, and you're going to put it in the chat for me so I can see it. Please do not leave the lesson for today without getting feedback on your race strategy, because I don't want you to lose points on not having it done correctly. Question number 3, what is the author's purpose for writing this article? So why do you think this author sat down and wrote this whole article on the teenage brain? Are they just trying to give us the facts about something, or are they trying to persuade us or convince us to think differently about something? Is there a topic here that this author says, you should think about this a little bit differently than you did before? Because if that's the case, then it's persuade. But if they're just straight up giving us facts, then inform. But I don't want you to just put the author's purpose is to inform or the author's purpose is to persuade. I want you to give me like what they're informing us about or what they're persuading us to believe. You're going to use the race strategy, so make sure you do in the text it says, and this shows or this means for number 3. And again, please put that in the chat for me and I will check your answers. Yeah, so you're, the way to start out the R for your race strategy on this one, the author's purpose for writing this article is ... And then you're going to move into your A, your answer. So think about why the author wrote this article, and you're going to answer that. And then in the text it says to prove your answer, and then this shows or this means. Are they just giving us facts, or are they trying to convince us or persuade us that we should be thinking differently about something? And if so, what is that thing that they want us to think differently about? Yeah, so the R, guys, remember, you're taking that question and you're turning it into a sentence. So the question is, what is the author's purpose for writing this article? The R is not you just repeating the question, it's restating the question. So it would take off the what is at the beginning and start from here. The author's purpose for writing this article is, and then you're going to answer. Yes, Caroline, you have the right answer. So is that inform or persuade?
Inform.
If they're trying to get you to think differently about something,